Josh.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going great. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for taking time to do this interview.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for thanks for helping us promote this thing.
Yeah, and I'm so glad to be able to do it too. I mean, with such an amazing band to be able to come out like this with Kings of Dust, and of course the new album just coming out next Friday already. I mean, it's so awesome to be able to help promote this thing.
Well, I'm sitting here with my drummer, Jimmy Taft. Hey, Josh, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thank you for joining in.
You bet. And I think Michael Beck might even show up here at some point. But, I figure people are sick of hearing what I have to say.
Oh, well, that's quite all right. And again, thank you very much for taking the time to be able to do this. Again, being able to talk about Kings of Dust here with the new album coming out next Friday. I've been able to check out this album over the last couple weeks, and I just love what's going on with this album. I mean, with such an affinity for the style of music, it's so great to be able to hear this again in 2020 with a great modern feel to it, and it hits right at home and exactly what I was looking for in 2020.
Well, we're trying to do something that's near and dear to our hearts. So, I mean, the stuff that we write is the kind of stuff that we like, and the highest compliment I could say about what I think of the record is I'd buy it even if I wasn't on it.
Yeah, and that's a great feeling as well too. I mean, when you're able to step aside from what you've created and you're able to listen back to it and just know that it's good music, and being able to take yourself out of the equation and know that it's good music, that is a great sign.
Yeah, it came out pretty much the way we had hoped. I mean, it's not a perfect record by any means, because who actually makes one unless it's Mutt Lange spending several $1 million making a Def Leppard record. But, we spent a lot of time getting it exactly the way we wanted it. I spent quite a bit of time getting the exact players that I wanted, because this is, the band's been going on and off for about 7 years. And originally it didn't start with, Jimmy on drums and Ryan on guitar. So it took me a while to find the right guys, and I finally did. And it's a pretty good time.
Oh, and I'm glad to see that it did take the directions that it needed to be able to make the album come out the way that it has. Of course, there was a lot of ups and downs during that time as well too, but I'm glad to see that the ups did come out and this album did actually make it to fruition.
Yeah, well, there was a couple of years there after I got done with my cancer treatment that I just didn't have the energy, and to be quite frank, the interest in doing it. I was more in tune with just trying to get my life together. And so, Jimmy and Ryan and Michael were very patient and said, yeah, when you're ready. But they kept saying, are you ready yet? And I kept saying, well, not yet. Well, let us know. Are you ready yet? And then finally, after about 3 years after my cancer treatment was done, I called them up and I said, yeah, I'm ready. So we just got right back into it and picked up like we had never stopped. It was right where we left off. So the transition was very smooth. The upside of that is that over the course of that time, we got to really focus on how we wanted to do it, exactly what we wanted to do, exactly what we wanted to say. So it's a very fair, honest document of where we were at when we did that. And some of those songs have been written as long ago as 7 years ago, and some of them were written a couple of weeks before we went in the studio. So it covers a wide spectrum of what we like while maintaining that 70s, early 80s sort of vibe at the same time.
Oh, and it's so great to hear that too, because I never would have guessed that there was any time lost between the beginning of writing the songs and going into the studio to be able to record the album. I mean, all of it flows together so well that it feels like everyone was just sitting there together writing these songs right before it went into the studio.
Well, it's when you get a group of guys like we have together, you can feel it, and it just all came together. Again, this sound that we've put together, I don't know that we set out to say, all right, we're going to sound like this. It's pretty organic. This is the stuff we grew up listening to, this type of music. So it comes very natural to us. And when it came down to getting busy and writing, that timeline really wasn't a factor. It just felt real natural and came to us pretty well.
The transition is pretty seamless over the course of the time that this thing started, and a couple of the songs like an Ocean and Ugly and Wolves and a few other ones were written when the project first got together by the original guitar player, Mike Petruno, and myself, and the songs were good. And even though he dropped out, we decided to keep it going. But writing the new songs, regardless of, a lot of those ideas come from my warped mind. But once I bring it in there, what Jimmy and Ryan and Michael add to it is what makes it into a song. Their parts, and that even on the original songs that we wrote, like Ocean and Ugly, Ryan and Jimmy that's their ideas as far as the way the rhythm section is structured, the way the drums are played, the way the guitars are played, the way the guitar solos are done. I might bring in the basic idea of the song, but it takes all four of us to kind of make it actually turn into what it eventually turns into. And like I said, some of those songs are written, Mama or Reflection, Devil, are written literally a week to 2 weeks before we went in the studio. So it really covers, again, that broad spectrum of this is where we're at 7 years ago, and this is where we're at now. And it just shows how honest of a record that it is, because it sounds like you said, and that's a compliment to us, and I appreciate that it sounds like we wrote it all at the same time. And that means a lot to me, because it tells me that we're right where we need to be. And oddly enough, we're writing new songs, because normally, you kind of stop and then work the record. Well, we have a whole bunch of new material. We've probably got a half a dozen new songs for the eventual second release. So we're not done yet.
Oh, and that's just incredible to hear that, too. I mean, when you got that musical chemistry and you got all of these ideas that you want to be able to lay down and put onto a new release, I mean, the fact that you're in that position where you can immediately start to work on that's so great to see that.
Yeah, it doesn't happen as often as you would think. I mean, a lot of people, when they write, they don't want really any input from the other members in the band. They want to bring in their song, and I've, been in situations. Badlands was not one of them. Badlands was one of those kind of things where everyone got to say what they wanted to say, which I liked and appreciated that. But there have been other projects that I've been in before and after Badlands where this is the song, here's how I want you to do it, and I don't really care what you have to say. This is my song, and you're going to do it the way I want. Well, usually I walk away from that. I mean, because unless you're going to pay me a whole bunch of money, there's no motivation for me to be involved in it. If I can't create, you're not paying me any money, and I can't create, then get someone else who, if you want someone to play your bass parts, get someone to do it, because that's not what I bring to the table. That's certainly not what Jimmy brings to the table. I don't tell Jimmy how to play his drums. I can play the drums, but I'm not a drummer. And so Jimmy, he gets to hear the track. He doesn't hear any previous anything, any drum ideas, anything like that. He interprets it the way he hears it the first time. Same with Ryan, and it just makes for a very honest interpretation. As Jimmy said, very organic, and it's very much the four guys together creating whatever it is we're creating at the time.
Oh, and again, it's so great to hear that, and that's why I am such a huge Badlands fan, is because I can hear it throughout both albums where, it's just like that creativity and that self-expression that's really going on throughout the entire band, and that's what's really drawing me to Kings of Dust, is everyone is being able to lay down what they want to, being able to play for the song, but being able to show off what they want to as far as when it comes to the band, and I'm glad to see that is still continuing, that you just have that love and appreciation for everyone else in the band, and you want to be able to show everyone off in the right light and create the best songs possible.
Well, if these guys can't do what they do, then I don't need to have them in the band. I want to have guys that are on the level of the great players that I've played with in the past, and Ryan and Jimmy are certainly as good as anyone that I've ever played with, and what they bring to the table is every bit as good and as important as anything else. So, I mean, these guys know their job, they know their business, they know how to create, they know what they want to say, and that makes it very important. I mean, the whole Badlands aspect, I get some comparisons from Kings to Badlands. Really, the only comparison is that I was in Badlands. I write very similar to the way that Jake writes, which is one of the reasons him and I hit it off so well. And also because Jake was very gracious in allowing everyone to create their part. And by the same token, I want guys that can create their own part. What Jimmy brings to this, I can't do. I can't write that. I can't write it in my head. I don't have that acumen to make that happen. And what Ryan does, I can't, again, while I can play some guitar, I'm not a guitarist. What Ryan adds to it, I can't do that. But it's a requirement for the guys that I play with to be able to do that, because while I might be, on this last record, the main architect of some of that. I've just maybe put the foundation down. It takes what these guys to make, what they add to make the final product sound what it sounds like. It sounds better than it would sound in my head. You know, when I write songs, I write them in my head. And by the time they get done adding their parts, whether it's Michael or Ryan or Jimmy, that's the final. It turns out to be better than I would have imagined. Would you say so, Jimmy?
I think so. You know, it's it's an interesting process. And to Greg's point, having the guys in the band who can share an ability, if you will, to be able to put down what we've done on this record, since we're talking about it. It makes it, and I'm going to go back to what you had said earlier, where you talked about how seamless it sounds, the songs from 7 years ago and now. You know, we were all able to say what we needed to say in the songs. They all come from, again, a very organic place. So it actually it's easy for us to write when we're together. It just feels natural.
I mean, the thing with the record and the songs on this record is the stuff that makes me interested in music is a lot of moving parts. You know, I don't like just having a verse and a chorus and then maybe another verse and a guitar solo and then you chorus out. That bores me. So I'm looking for something that is saying more. It's certainly not Rush or Yes, because I'm not really that way, but from a hard rock perspective, I like a lot of moving parts, a lot of time changes, a lot of breaks, a lot of different parts. The guitar solo is usually never the same as the rest of the song, although on Like an Ocean it is. But normally I try to write something completely different. And that's what keeps me interested. And that is also part of the similarity to Badlands. Again, we don't sound like it, but Jake's influences and mine are the same. Same with these guys. Their influences are the same as mine. So when you get to be in a band, you know, when I was in Badlands and I got to hear the way that Jake wrote, it just made it so much more fun to play my bass because I got to create such great stuff. That's the same thing I wanted to bring to Kings, is that here it is. Jimmy gets to say what he says, and people, it's not an ego thing. It's just something that you have to say about yourself. This is me, this is who I am, this is how I project my musical personality, my integrity. Same with Ryan, same with Michael. So it really has a lot to do. That's very near and dear to me, is to be able to write songs that are very interesting, very hooky, very melodic, but also have a lot of things going on, because I've heard this a lot. People will listen to the record and say, wow, every time I listen to it, I hear something I didn't hear before. Well, that means that we did our job.
Yes.
Yeah, and I was actually going to bring that up as well, too, and I'm glad to see that others are being able to pick up on that as well. Like, every time that I do listen to it, I hear something that's different about it, be it a key change or a time change or a way something's played or something like that. And, you know, it's great to see all these great details that are a part of this music, where it can be so different in hard rock music, but, you know, it's not like on the progressive side, like Rush or Yes, but you're still able to be yourselves, and it comes out naturally like that, because that's what you want to be able to create.
Well, exactly. And the thing about that, like I said, the thing about that kind of music is it keeps me interested. It makes it, you can still write music that's hooky and has a great groove and a great beat, and it's very melodic. It's very you can sing along to it, and it still can have some intricacies to it that just kind of give it our own stamp. You know, we're not trying to be anyone else. We're trying to be ourselves. We don't really see ourselves as anything other than Kings of Dust. We all have backgrounds that we come from, things that we've done, and what it is when we get together, it's all of our influences, all of our experiences, and even on some level, there's an emotional content involved in this. So all of that is present in what we are trying to say and what I think we have said.
This record, for me, it encompasses just about everything that I love about music. You know, to Greg's point, there's a lot of moving parts, but you know, there's nothing in there that sounds contrived. I mean, they all come from, again, a very organic place. So it from start to finish, it encompasses just about everything I love in music. So
you were saying, you know, about the parts. There's one song on there which is yours, not mine. The guitar solo section has 6 key changes. Who writes a guitar solo section with 6 key changes? When I was showing that to Ryan, he looked at me and he said, "You've absolutely lost your mind." He goes, "How am I supposed to write to this?" Well, I think he figured it out pretty darn well.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, yeah, and it's great to hear that as well too, because to me that's one of the standout tracks to me for a reason like that. I mean, being able to have all of these different kinds of key changes in that section alone, and just being able to make it sound like it came off so seamless when you listen back to it.
You know, it's funny because it's actually a relatively simple song as far as the stuff I write, because I didn't want to overcomplicate it with a bunch of other parts going into the solo, because I knew I had this 6 key change thing going on, which kind of really took it to another level. So it's a very solid, it's got a lot of swing to it. It's got a kind of a heavy Sabbathy sort of Zeppelin-y, early Zeppelin-y kind of vibe. And then the 6 key change comes up. And when you're explaining to someone, yeah, it's going to have 6 key changes, they look at you like you have 2 heads. But then when you listen to how that Ryan structured that with his solo and how Jimmy and I structured what we did from a rhythm section point of view, it all just fits in there like, well, of course it has 6 key changes. Don't all songs should have 6 key changes.
It came off very natural sound.
It's not forced at all.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. So, also with that in mind, I mean, it's great to be able to have both of you with this when I'm thinking about this when it comes to the production side. For both of you, I mean, what was it like to, for Jimmy, I mean, what was it like for you to be able to listen back to the album for the first time when everything was done? And for Greg, I mean, what was it like for you to be able to hear all of these songs and be able to help track it and produce the album?
Well, the interesting part of the record is that Michael Beck owns his own studio. So we didn't have any time constraints or financial constraints where we had to do it in X amount of time. So it allowed us to spend a lot of time getting it right. And it's a real studio. It's a standalone studio. It's not like a bunch of gear in some guy's living room. So it's an actual place. That's his business. So we got to spend a lot of time mixing it. The recording process is actually very simple. Yeah. All those songs, there's not one song on there that has more than 3 takes. And there's a number of songs on there that are 1 or 2 takes. I mean, we were rehearsed well enough that if we nailed it right and it felt good, sometimes we wouldn't even do another take. We would know, collectively that we'd hit the mark right there. We hit the note. We knew that's what we wanted to do. From a mixing perspective, it was more complicated because I had a certain mix in mind. I was trying to do kind of a very Ted Templeman sort of thing. And the way that Michael mixes in his studio is a lot more modern, which is everything is kind of right up the middle. The bass, you can't really hear it. The kick drum has a lot of click to it. It's not really a real kick drum. And that's what's required in this day and age, unfortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it. So we mixed it the first time and I didn't hear what I wanted. So we remixed it a second time and I still didn't hear what I wanted. So then I went down there with Beck and we started mixing it exactly the way I wanted it, the way I heard it in my head. And then Jimmy and Ryan came in and we all sat there and kind of had some input onto how this was supposed to sound. Most people use about 60% of the sonic space that there's available to mix. So if you're looking at a TV and it's a 60-inch big screen TV, that's what you hear. That's the level that you can go to one side or the other. This record is mixed like it's a 220-inch big screen TV, and you can hear stuff wide right, wide left, and all across the spectrum, which allows a space for the drums, for Jimmy to do his thing, where you can hear his kick drum and everything has got some separation. It allows a space for the bass. It allows the guitars to have a lot of space where they can kind of weave in and out, and then all that stuff on top of it. So that was the hardest part of mixing it, and the other hard part was mastering it, because the mastering guy that we were using had never mastered a record that had bass this prominent in the mix. And so we ended up mastering some of it ourselves because we had a sound in mind. We had taken a long time to get there and we didn't want to settle. We wanted to get it exactly the way we wanted it, or as close to it as we could. And then it would either live or die on its own. So it was an interesting process. It was a very gratifying process. And in my mind, and I think the rest of the guys would agree, it was a very successful process.
Yeah, the first time that I had a chance to go in, I'd been in periodically throughout some of the tracking process, vocals and whatnot. The first time I heard it played back when Greg and Michael had gotten the sound that Greg is talking about, the overall mix, without tooting my own horn, I was pretty blown away. I was pretty proud of what we had accomplished. It's sonically, it's definitely different than what you hear in most mixes, as Greg said, nowadays. And he said, for better or worse, I'm not sure. I'm gonna take the low road and say for the worse. I really think that our approach has played a huge role in how well that this record has been received so far.
I only took the high road because I need my karma to be better.
Oh.
I had a bad week last week. I'm trying to have a better week this week.
Oh, I completely understand, and it's so great to be able to hear that from both ends on that as well too. I mean, the fact that there was so minimal of tracking where you didn't have to do multiple takes of the same part over and over again, and just like cutting and pasting things together, but it was actually like full tracks that were going on with it, and like sticking to your guns and being able to create the mix, the master, the production, everything that you wanted to have on this album without any restrictions of the sound that you were looking for. And the fact that you were able to get it the way that you have on this album, I mean, I can't wait to see how it's going to be going on future releases as well too. I mean, if it's already turned out this well so far.
Well, our next step is vinyl, and I think it'll translate to vinyl real well. One of the reasons we're not in a big hurry to make it downloadable is because I think you lose something sonically when you go to some of those platforms. It's too compressed. The bass would sound different. The kick drum would sound different. On another, to go back to something you were saying, the bass and drums on this record are all completely live. I don't even know how, a very, very minimal amount of things I went in and fixed, and I mean very minimal. If Jimmy and I couldn't nail it, and we did, then we would have just stopped and started over with the track. So I mean, the drums are exactly the way he played them. The bass is exactly the way we played it. And Ryan's guitar, rhythm guitar, a big part of that we kept as well. So from a rhythm perspective, bass, drums, and rhythm guitar, it's pretty much live. And then whatever we layered onto it later, which isn't a whole lot of stuff, because I'm not a big fan of that. But whatever rhythm guitar thing or harmonies, solos, that's all added after, but everything else is pretty live, and most people don't do that. I'm not a big fan of cutting and pasting. I actually hate it.
So do I. And I'll tell you, I think when you listen to this, you can feel that it's primarily a live recorded record. That's not an easy thing to achieve in a studio.
Certainly not anymore.
Yeah.
Because everyone wants to go right to Pro Tools. Well, let me just, I'll move that around. Yeah. No, how about if we actually learn the song and play it right? How about that idea?
That's a thought.
So I'm not a big fan of the, what we'll do is we'll Pro Tool it, we'll cut and paste, we'll auto correct it on the, I come from the 70s and the 80s. You had to go in there, you had to know your job. You couldn't go in there and just say, well, I kind of got it. Can you fix it in the mix? No, I don't want to fix it in the mix. I just want it to be right. And I want the real emotion that we had at the time that we're recording it. Because once you start fixing and adding and all that, you lose the honesty and the emotion and the integrity that you were trying to create, the spontaneity that you were trying to create right at that time. That's all gone then.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, and I think that's another reason why I do love and appreciate this album so much, is that fact that so much of it is that live, real recordings of it. It's not pro-tooled, it's not resampled upon resampling, it's actually being played. It's got that great, real warmth to the sound to it, because it doesn't have that hollow digital sound to it. It's real acoustics on the drums, it's the real instrumentation that's going on there, and it feels like real musicians playing real music. And as much of as a dying art form as that can really become, the more that I hear someone that is continuing to do that, or even newer bands that are taking that approach as well, it couldn't be appreciated more for that reason.
Part of what we were trying to do is the way that it was done back, in the 60s and the 70s, where you actually had to know your job to be able to do it. And a lot of the bands that try to do that now, they have no experience with that. They've been kind of brought up on the American Idol, America's Got Talent sort of thing, where you don't get in a garage and slug it out and then go do some crappy gig somewhere and pay your dues. You're right there. Boom, I'm on TV. Here I am. Hi, Mom. And we don't have any of that because we are a little bit older. That style of music, that style of recording is all done firsthand for us. That's what we grew up on. Those are the kind of songs I wrote back in the 70s. It's the kind of stuff we all played. So it's, again, it's a very real sort of thing. There's no cutting and pasting on this record. None. Not a bit. There's no autocorrect. There's no pitch correcting. It is what it is. Like, that's why I can say it's not a perfect record, but it's perfect for what it is at the time.
Oh, yeah, and I think another great way to look at it is it might not be like a perfect album where like every single note is perfect or it's played exactly the same way, but it's a human album. It's a real album, and that is so much more to be appreciated, especially as a musician myself, as a music lover like myself, and just knowing that actual musicians are playing this, and there is zero reliance on anything digitally to be able to enhance the take, and just like actually being able to perform the takes in the studio the way that it used to be, the way that it should still be that way, and the fact that you are continuing it that way, I just love that.
Well, there's too much of a instant gratification musical world where you can just have someone come in and they just kind of hack out a track, and then they do a lot of doctoring to it. I mean, engineers and producers definitely make their weight in these days in money, because a lot of times you're doing all the work. I mean, if I had to have a band that had to be Pro Tooled to death and auto-corrected, and there's
Drum loops.
Yeah, there's no sampling on there. The drums. Jimmy's got a friggin' $10,000 drum set. If it doesn't, if I can't get that real drum set on there, what the hell do I even have it on there for? You know, so I wanted something that was like the sound I heard in my head. It's the way that I hear it on this record, along with all the voices in my head telling me to do bad things. No way. So that the way that the record came out is the way that I heard it in my head, and even at times trying to explain to these guys, here's what I'm thinking. Here's the way I hear it. Sometimes they go, okay. I'm not really 100% sure. And then when they would hear it, they go, okay, now I get it. So, you know, this is the perfect record for me personally, because I got to say everything I wanted to say. I got to do everything I wanted to do. And I got to make it sound the way that I wanted it to sound. Very seldom do you get to make a record that sounds the way that you hear it in your head. And I've been lucky with that. Now, Michael Beck just showed up, better late than ever. And this is Josh.
Hi, Josh.
Hi.
So he'll probably have something to say, but it won't be important, so feel free to edit him out.
Oh, well, nothing wrong with that. And, you know, it's just, I love hearing that ringing endorsement that you just gave for that album. And, you know, I do wish that was something that more bands would strive for, being able to have the sounds that they were looking for in their head, especially with the resume that you have and the rest of the band has, and just being able to make the time, being able to put everything into making the album the way that you want it to be. And this is just a shining example of not taking any limits and just making it the way that you want to, and it can just come off sounding like such an incredibly produced and well-written record.
Well, part of that is, again, the luxury of having Michael own his own studio. So,
and I agree with Greg on that, but at the same time, this wasn't that hard of a record to make. You know, the musicianship that's involved and the players that are involved with it, it would be, you know, I've told Greg on several occasions, if I couldn't hear you on the record, what do I need you for?
Because I'd say, I think the bass is too loud, and everyone would say no, and I'd go, okay, because I'm not used to making records where you can hear the bass that prominent, where it actually has that much of its own space. To kind of go back to something you were saying, the reason that younger bands, I mean, it would be great if they all did this, but most of them have no experience doing it this way.
Exactly.
And a lot of guys that have studios or that do recording, whether it's a bunch of gear in a house or a real studio, they also don't have any experience making a record this way. I come up in the analog generation. Digital was something that came up in the tail end of my time in LA, and I remember thinking, the hell is this? And I didn't like it then. It wasn't warm enough. It wasn't real enough. So the reason that this is easy for us is because this is the way I grew up doing it, and same with these guys. And the reason you don't hear enough of it anymore is because it's really, really a lost art.
It really is.
It's a shame. And it is a shame.
And as a studio owner and, you know, my day job being a producer, he's exactly right. It's not just the sound of digital has come a long way to emulate tape to where it's come a long, long way. But the art of
recording it the way it was done on analog without the opportunity to Pro Tools it, so to speak, is a lost art. And I see that with bands all the time. When I record, I kind of use Pro Tools as a glorified tape machine. So I don't really utilize all the bells and whistles that are in it, because to me they're not really good.
I mean, on this record as well, Jimmy's not using a click track on a lot of it, except in sections where we are going to add a guitar solo later. There's a lot of stuff that's just the real feel, where the click would count us in, then he would play, we would turn the click off while we played, then he'd turn the click back on when we were getting to a section where we were going to maybe have to add something, and Jimmy would be spot on with the click. We didn't even have to, there's very few drummers that can play without a click, and then it's even rare to find someone that can use the click at one point and then come in where you're supposed to be to add the click a couple of minutes later, and you're still right on. That doesn't happen very often. I guarantee you that.
And in the recording process, Jimmy was the only one, other than maybe the intro part of it, that heard the click. So because he's the drummer that he is, it gives him the opportunity to give that push and pull in a very analog style way, even though the click is there. And that's the sign of a pretty good drummer. You can pay me later, Jim.
Oh, shucks. You guys are too nice. Josh, it's not usually this good. And I'm going to revel in this.
And it won't be any minute from now.
Well, Jimmy's a multimillionaire and lives in a huge mansion.
Oh, here we go.
Lives in a huge mansion with a boat and all this stuff. I mean, Jimmy's garage is bigger than my house. So I'm just basically waiting for the day that Jimmy pays me back for me basically making him, well, for lack of a better word, famous.
Oh, my goodness.
I was going to say relevant, but yeah.
Well, almost. We should make a movie. Never mind.
Oh, that's just so great. But thinking about that again, Jimmy, as a drummer myself, I do appreciate your style so much on this album, and actually just being a real, authentic drummer when it comes to that. Because anytime that I've ever recorded, I've always been the kind of person that wants to be able to do everything in one take. And even if I screw up or I drop a stick or something like that, I want to start from the beginning of the song and not just edit myself into that part again, because I want it to be a real natural take from start to finish and have that real push and pull, even when you do have the click on there. And when you're able to manipulate the time like that and still give it that real natural feel with a click, you're doing such an incredible job with that, and you hear that throughout the entire album, and it really makes the album stand out because of that.
That's all just me. That's not Jimmy.
It's funny when we were listening to some of the playback on Mama. If you're a drummer, you've probably noticed that there's a little bit of push and pull on that track, and there's a real heavy pull throughout the verse on that. At one point, I remember asking the guys, "Am I pulling against that too much?" And on that particular track, I think it really helped the feel of it.
Absolutely, Jim.
I like a much more natural feel anyway. So the great bands from the '60s and the '70s didn't worry about the click. Lots of times they didn't even have it. And so they, if a song sped up or slowed down, that to me, that was just the breathing of the song. It's the song doing its thing. Not every song is meant to be at 180 BPM through the whole song. It's supposed to basically push and pull. Some should be on the front end of the beat, some of it might be on the back end of the beat, and there might be everything in between that. That's just the breath of the song. And the way that I write, because I do have a lot of parts in some of those songs, you could not play all those in lockstep with the click. It wouldn't sound right. It would sound robotic. The feel wouldn't be right, because in certain songs there's a sort of almost like a funky swing thing going on, and it's more of a rock thing in another part, and then maybe it's going to halftime, and then maybe it's going to halftime again after that, another halftime slower. You can't do that on a click. It won't sound right.
It's not human. Human sounds better.
Did you just say I'm not human? Because I'd agree.
Oh, but no, I agree with that last sentiment as well too. Human is always better, and every time that you do make a Human album, it just has so much more authenticity behind it. And yeah, again, musically, everything that's going on there, just being able to hear all these real human elements that's going on there, and of course the lyrics as well too, being able to have great emotion behind it, and being able to show off so many different styles that's going on here, but still being able to maintain its own identity. It just, hearing this Kings of Dust album is just something I really want people to be able to really appreciate and check out when it comes out next Friday, for the reason of hearing what authenticity and a real human album sounds like. And I hope that it can inspire other musicians to be able to get away from that cut and paste of the world. Even though it can come out sounding quote unquote perfect on the record, it's so much more important to actually show that you are playing the music that you're playing, that you can play it either live or if someone asks you to play it for them, and just have that real identity to your sound.
Well, if we were able to inspire something like that, wouldn't that be the ultimate compliment?
Absolutely.
I mean, we've touched on a number of times, and you said as well, it's just my concept, my idea was I wanted it to be very real, visceral, the whole thing. I wanted it to be an honest document of what we were doing at the time. And, so years from now, if we're looking back on it, you look at that. I mean, in the end, you can't look at yourself in the mirror and be proud of the work you've done. And I've been lucky enough to be, proud of almost everything I've done. And what's the point? The money's never good enough to do something that goes against what your character. You want to be able to represent what you do honestly. And again, I think we really managed to hit that there. And I think probably everything that we do will have that certain, stamp of that on it, because that's just really who we are anyway. So.
Absolutely. And proud to be that. Amen.
Oh, so glad to hear that. So, mentioned before, you are working on new material for the next release, but is there anything else to be looking forward to, but obviously besides the new album coming out next Friday? Like, is there any shows coming up on the horizon, or are we just looking forward to the next album?
No, we're working on the way of doing it. I mean, the chances of us getting on a tour bus for 3 months, that's not going to happen. Jimmy has a business. Michael has the studio. I run a guitar store here in Phoenix, Bizarre Guitar and Drum. I'm here 5 days a week. I have to be here. However, there's a good possibility we could take 10 days. There's a promoter in Texas that wants to book us for 10 days in Texas and Oklahoma, or, chances of us going to LA or Vegas. There's a lot of interest back east. So we could possibly do fly-in dates. There's even some talk about Japan and maybe even some festivals overseas in Europe, maybe this summer. So we're kind of open to whatever, as long as we can make it to the point where it actually makes sense, where we can string enough dates to get where we want to go. I wouldn't mind doing a Monsters of Rock. I wouldn't mind doing M3 or any of those kind of things. So even the festivals in the States, they're all, within arm's distance of what we want to do. We just got to kind of pick and choose. I mean, we'll play here locally and down in Tucson. But playing live, we've never played live in this band. So we are really kind of jonesing for the opportunity to go out there and do that and see how the music translates live, which I know it will translate well because the record's basically live.
Yeah.
And see what people's response is. And I believe hopefully we'll get the same kind of response that, we've sold over 1,000 of these records on our own of the CD. And the response has been off the hook. So I can't imagine it being any different. And so we want to be able to take that out live, and people seem to be very interested in hearing it live.
And if for any reason it doesn't translate that well, it'll be Jimmy's fault.
Because everything is.
Always got to blame the drummer.
Yeah, the drummer.
Right under the bus.
Drummers always get all the crap.
Well, that's just because they like to hang around with musicians.
Oh.
I mean, I would actually be a drummer. I just don't have the temperament to take that kind of abuse.
Oh, it's so true.
Actually, I think we should start bagging on Ryan since he's not there.
Yeah, exactly. Pick on somebody else, man.
Hey, God gives you a gift, you got to use it.
Oh, exactly. And I love that approach, that the way that you're looking at possible upcoming shows as well too. The idea of having quality shows rather than just doing a quantity amount of shows. I mean, rather than like being on the road like months at a time, like being able to do some flying shows or some festival appearances or playing locally, just like making those shows actually mean a little bit more than just being run down to the ground and ragged at the end of a month or 2 month long tour. I mean, make those shows mean so much more, and I like that.
Well, we've all done it, especially, I've done some long tours, 10 months, 11 months, 9 months. And, that's whoever says that, God, I wish I could go do that. It's because they haven't went and done it.
They haven't done it.
You don't get paid for that hour and a half you're on stage. You get paid for that other 22 and a half hours you're in a tour bus going, God, I hate these guys. So who farted? Knock it off. We'll brush your teeth, whatever. So you're, that lifestyle, I mean, it's cool. I'm an old man. I'm over 60. I have no desire. I like sleeping in my own bed. However, I do have the desire to go play live with this, and I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head there. We're always going to make every live show count, because we're not going to go out for 3 straight months doing 5 shows a week. Sure. So when we go out, we're going to represent who we are, what we do, what we have to say, with as much intensity and honesty as we possibly can, and really try to enjoy what we're doing, because it won't be happening every week.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And when people get the opportunity to be able to see you live, it's going to mean that much more too. And I think it's going to be such a greater connection as well. I mean, from being on the stage to being an audience member, I mean, being able to appreciate those songs in that live context and everything else that could happen into a live show. And yeah, instead of just being on the road months on end, playing 5 to 7 days a week, and just all of that stuff that happens so much in previous bands and in life before. I mean, now is that time to be able to take a band like Kings of Dust and pick the right shows, being able to pick out the songs that you want to be able to play, what people want to hear, and just have a great time with it.
Well, we want to do some shows before I turn to dust. And I am getting up there in years now.
In several years, that'll be the name. It'll be Greg Chason's Turn to Dust.
There you
Oh,
go.
that's great. But, I think with that, I think that's such a great note to be ending on. And thank you, all 3 of you, so much for taking this time to be able to talk to me about everything that's going on in the world of Kings of Dust right now. And, of course, the new album coming out next Friday. I can't recommend it enough. This is what I love about hard rock music, being able to hear a group of musicians that truly care about the music that they're creating and want it to be as real, authentic, and human as possible, and being able to listen to it every single time and being able to pick up on something new, something different, and just being able to enjoy that experience every time. And especially going through this interview and just having this great conversation with all of you, this has just been an amazing time, and I can't thank you enough for taking this time to be able to talk to me.
Thanks, absolutely.
You know what? I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to talk about what it is we've done, and giving us the support. I mean, it's so hard to do music in this day and age with every other way people do it. It's so foreign to how I grew up doing it. So trust me, I appreciate your support and you giving us the opportunity to talk about this. So all I tell you, March 13th, if you like 70s style hard rock with a little something extra, you might like Kings of Dust. Check it out.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.